What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron. Today we're going to talk through my 8 must-starts and stats for Week 5 of the fantasy football season. We tried this video last week and I had some fun with it, but essentially what this is I go through my weekly rankings for the week, I compare them to the expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, and I give you guys the players I'm higher on than in consensus with some data nuggets to go with that. Last week we actually did really well where we actually called the Nico Collins explosion game, so hopefully we can kind of have another good week. We'll see what happens here. But as always, if you enjoy, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, the first player we're going to talk through here is Calvin Ridley. We're going to start a little bit luxurious, I promise, as we get through this video. We're going to get dumpster divey in some ways, but I do want to give you guys the confidence to start Calvin Ridley. I absolutely love him this week. Now, the format of this video is going to be as follows. We're going to show the player like this. I know that we could show like it'd be more visually pleasing to show the head of the guy, but you can see, you have the name, you have the matchup. ECR's expert consensus ranking, so that's what the consensus has him ranked on Fantasy Pros. My ranking, wide receiver 12, he's the consensus wide receiver 18, so we're 6 spots ahead of consensus on Calvin Ridley. His team total is 21.5, so Vegas sets lines every week. His implied team total, how many points this team is implied to score this week, 21.5, 15th in the NFL, and they are 5.5 point underdogs here. Now, for each start, I'm also going to give you a stat here. And the stat for this one is Calvin Ridley has just a 7.4% target rate versus man, while leading the Jaguars with a 21% target rate versus zone. So you can see here, this is on the right-hand side. PFF actually dives into the man coverage and zone coverage rankings for each team, each secondary. And you can see when it's man coverage, Christian Kirk absolutely eats 34.5% target rate. Calvin Ridley only at 7.4%. But when we flip that to zone, Calvin Ridley, 21% target rate, looks like more of himself. Now, after playing the Falcons, who are top 5 in man coverage rate with shadow treatment from A.J. Terrell, Ridley gets the much more balanced Bills this week, who are 18th in man coverage rate and 16th zone coverage rate. The Jaguars will also have the traveling advantage, staying in London versus a weakened Bills secondary that lost their number 1 cornerback, Tre'Davious White, which probably means even more zone, right? They're not going to trust their corners more to play man. So when we have Calvin Ridley here, we are firing him up as a wide receiver 1 in a nice bounce back spot. But you can see here, this little graphic here, that was last week. A.J. Terrell followed Calvin Ridley on 90% of his routes. Again, Calvin Ridley against man coverage in this offense, it seems like they're targeting Christian Kirk much more. And A.J. Terrell is one of the top corners in the league. We now have a much softer matchup here against a zone-heavy secondary, and what should be a game where the Jaguars are going to have to pass the ball playing from behind as 5.5 point favorites. Look, I don't give out betting picks or advice on this channel, but I do kind of love the Jaguars +6 or +5.5, whatever it is, at your sportsbook. And then we also have, you can see, when we take out the rest of the sort of traffic here, you can see that Tre'Davious White's the best corner on this team by far. It sucks so bad that he tore his Achilles, but he's now not around. The rest of these guys, in terms of their coverage, are sort of shaky. So I love Calvin Ridley to kind of get some squeaky wheel treatment here. This is a matchup that should favor him, and it should be a matchup where they're going to throw the ball a ton. So for me, Calvin Ridley is a top 12 option for me this week. Now, in the same game on the other side of the field, we have Dalton Kincaid, who's going to be in London versus Jacksonville. He's the consensus tight end 13. He is my tight end 9. I'm 4 spots higher than consensus here. And the stat is that Dalton Kincaid is coming off his best route percentage game of the season at 79%. So he was out there on 79% of the pass plays running a route for the Bills. Now, this week, he gets the pass funnel Jaguars, who have the 4th best EPA per play rush defense. EPA per play is just expected points added per play. So on a per play basis, per drive, expected points added just measures this down and distance from this spot on the field. You're expected to score this many points. You're expected to, get a first down or move the chains from this spot. And the more you can go over expected, the better. The more you underachieve from your field position, right? Where let's say it's like third and 2 on the opposing 20 and you turn the ball over, that's a big no-no because you were expected to probably get a field goal at worst there. So it just measures all of that, puts on per play basis to sort of factor out volume. It's a really, really good measure of just efficiency across the board. So they have the 4th best EPA per play rush defense, the Jaguars, and they are causing opponents to have the 5th highest pass rate over expectation, passing the ball 3.4% over what their opponents are expected to. The Jaguars are also allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends this season. I love this as a breakout game for Dalton Kincaid. Again, you can see 76% of the routes in week 1, but wasn't really featured. Only 11% target per route run. Then he got on the field way less in week 2, 59%, but he was featured 26% of the targets, 26% target per route run. Week 3, a down week. Week 4, he comes out here and gets like almost a full-time role pretty much. Or I would actually call that a full-time role. 79% of the routes, 17% of the targets. And now Dawson Knox, I think that he was limited in practice this week. Dalton Kincaid is going to be a mismatch for this defense. He does a really good job of being the weakness of that Jaguars defense in the middle, those safeties, those linebackers, where their corners and their run defense has been amazing so far this year. So Dalton Kincaid, if there was ever a time to fire him up, it would be this week. Now our third must-start and stat for this week is Raheem Mostert. Now I know he didn't have a great week last week, but he's going to be at home versus the Giants. And I think, he's not the boldest call of all time, Raheem Mostert, but I think there's going to be some people that think that this is just going to be a passing of the torch straight to Devin Achane. Now, maybe you think that because I've been talking glowingly of Devin Achane, but Raheem Mostert's still going to have his role on this offense. And the stat is Raheem Mostert has seen 12-plus opportunities in every single game this year for the Dolphins. 5 running backs have seen 12 or more opportunities versus the Giants this year, averaging 16.6 points per game across those 5 running backs, which would have been the RB9 on the year so far. So if Raheem Mostert gets to his 12-plus opportunities, he should be in the RB1 mix. And just looking on paper, I mean, they're 11.5 favorites at home. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have explosive plays. This Giants defense sucks. The team total here, they're expected to score 29.5 points this week, the most in the NFL. You just want pieces of this offense across the board. The Dolphins are first in rush EPA per play, second in rush success rate, second in explosive rush rate, where the Giants are allowing 5.8% explosive runs, 27th in the NFL. Across the board, Dolphins are amazing run offense. The Giants are a bottom 5 defense, allowing a lot of explosive plays. Now, on the other side of that game, we also have WanDale Robinson. Now, WanDale Robinson don't get over your skis with WanDale Robinson, okay? He's still just my wide receiver 40. But if you're getting deep into your bag, like you're talking through like Jaden Reed and Josh Downs, and I'm trying to think of some other guys that are behind him. But if it's just really ugly, WanDale Robinson's not a terrible play here, where he's going to be on the other side of this game. It's going to be a pass-heavy environment, right, where they're 11.5-point underdogs on the road. They're going to be trailing the entire game, having to throw the ball. Now, the stat here for WanDale Robinson is after just a 25% route participation in his first game back from an ACL tear, WanDale ran the 2nd most routes on the Giants in week 4, right? He played his first game week 3, second game week 4. 63% of the routes, second on that team this week. This is going to continue to climb post-ACL, and he should be peppered with targets this week, leading the Giants this season with a 27% target per route run on the year. Miami is also allowing the 11th most fantasy points to wide receivers out of the slot this year, and the Giants should absolutely pepper WanDale underneath in a trailing game script here. To me, he's a really fun flex play. He's my wide receiver 40. He's consensus wide receiver 51. I am 11 spots higher than consensus on WanDale. Now, another short king we have here, our number 5 must start and stat on the week, Tank Dell. He is going to be in Atlanta. He is consensus wide receiver 30. He's my wide receiver 27. So 3 spots higher, nothing crazy, but he's somebody I really, really like this week, where the stat we have here is that Tank Dell ranks 6th among all wide receivers in the NFL in fantasy points per route run versus man coverage. The Falcons are 9th in man coverage rate. You're going to have Nico Collins shadowed by A.J. Terrell, who just shut down Calvin Ridley. I don't think that Nico Collins is going to get shut down per se. He's still a top 24 play for me this week, but it could slow him down a little bit and free some things up for Tank Dell underneath. Tank Dell, to me, a really fun start this week. Again, Houston, in Atlanta. If Nico Collins struggles a little bit at all, I think Tank Dell is going to be the main beneficiary of this top 10 man coverage rate from the Falcons defense. Now, moving on from that, we have our number 6 must start and stat, Jaleel McLaughlin. I just want to give you guys confidence if you're out there and you picked up Jaleel McLaughlin and you're really down bad at running back. Let's say you're looking at him, you're looking at like Justice Hill, and you're looking at Matt Breida, who Saquon's probably going to be back here, or Zach Moss, and you're a little bit of a pickle with like Austin Eckler or Kenneth Walker on bye. I love Jaleel McLaughlin this week. Now, I do know that Javonte Williams practiced in a limited fashion today. I want to say I'd be shocked if he played this week, and if he did play this week, it'd be in a limited fashion. It doesn't really affect how I feel about Jaleel McLaughlin at this point in time. Now, he is the consensus RB32. He is my RB29. I have him 3 spots higher than consensus. It's also very interesting. Vegas seems to think that the Broncos are going to score a ton at home on the Jets. Not a ton, but score the 10th most points this week among teams with that 22.75 team total, which is interesting. Home favorites, high scoring, that should benefit the running back. And Jaleel McLaughlin just has way more speed, juice, everything than Samaje Perine. Even if he splits things 50-50, that still might be enough for Jaleel McLaughlin to get home. He currently ranks 1st in missed tackles forced per attempt, 5th in rushing yards over expected per attempt, 5th in yards after contact per attempt, 6th in PFF rush grade, 9th in explosive run percentage, among 69 running backs with 10 or more carries. Now, despite the Jets having a really strong defensive line, they've been a fantasy-friendly run funnel, allowing the 4th most rushing yards in the NFL this season and the 12th most fantasy points to running backs, with their opponents passing the ball minus 3.2% over expected. So they're actually forcing their opposing teams, right? Like, Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to want to pass the ball, but their pass defense is actually amazing. Their pass rush gets after the quarterback, and that actually forces teams to want to run the ball against the Jets, which is kind of like the opposite of what it was last season, where they were just like a shutdown run defense. So we saw Isaiah Pacheco, one of these undersized juice backs, not quite undersized like Jaleel McLaughlin, but you know what I'm saying. He's not a 225-pound bowling ball, and he got home versus the Jets. Jaleel McLaughlin kind of fits that similar type of mold. He has legit juice here. Those stats aren't flukish. He's up there in the top right of that quadrant of the rushing yards over expected and EPA per rush chart. He looks like he has a ton of juice. If he can just get 10 to 15 touches here, I think that he can give you RB3 serviceable numbers with some decent upside. If he rips one off long, if he gets a touchdown, Jaleel McLaughlin, I think you can fire up this week if you're up against it. Now, our 7th must start and stat for this week is going to be Rashid Shaheed here. Now, he is going to be in New England versus the Patriots. He's consensus wide receiver 46. He's my wide receiver 42 this week. And the stat we're going with for Rashid Shaheed is he is one of 4 wide receivers with a perfect passer rating, 158.3 when targeted versus man coverage. He also leads the Saints in fantasy points per route run versus man coverage. This week, he faces the New England Patriots, who run the 6th highest rate of man coverage in the NFL, and they just lost by far their best cover corner in Christian Gonzalez. Sadly, he was killing it. I would have been happy seeing him sort of finish out this year, but I mean, Rashid Shaheed's a boom-bust play. But again, when we're talking through like really fringe options in your flex, it's not the worst thing in the world to stick somebody in there that could just have a massive week. So I don't mind betting on a spike week here if your team is ravaged by injuries, buys. My only concern, though, is Derek Carr's recovery from his injury after having the lowest ADOT and passing grade of his year last week. So hopefully he gets a little bit of a bounce back. Derek Carr, he gets healthy enough to sort of play actual quarterback here. And Rashid Shaheed, I think you're going to see Bill Belichick really focus in on the best passing option in Chris Olave. And I think that he is going to go to Michael Thomas as well, who's much better against zone and, you know, beating zone with kind of what he does out of the slot. Rashid Shaheed is the perfect man beater over the top against this scheme. There is a good chance that he gets home this week. Rashid Shaheed, a really fun flex play if you're in a deep league, if you're in a pickle, definitely give Rashid Shaheed a look. Now, our last must start and stat for this video is Matthew Stafford. He is at home versus the Eagles. He is a 4.5-point underdog here. They're projected for the 12th most points this week. He's the consensus QB 16. He's my QB 11. I am 5 spots higher than consensus, and the stat here is that Matt Stafford has the 2nd most passing yards this year at 1,229 yards, but just 25th with 3 passing touchdowns. PFF has an expected points per game model, and they have him expected for 5.8 passing touchdowns at this point. So he's really underperforming his passing touchdowns right now. Regression is coming versus a pass-friendly Eagles defense. Their scary front has caused teams to pass the ball 3.7% over expected, 4th in the NFL, with their secondary allowing the 8th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. With cutback, Stafford is a QB1 this week and a great bye week fill-in for any Deshaun, Herbert, Geno teams. If you have Joe Burrow, he's a great fill-in. But this is a perfect setup for him where he's going to have his favorite weapon back. The Eagles have actually been pretty friendly towards the pass. And on top of that, they've been forcing teams to pass the ball with a 3.7% pass rate over expected to their opponents. So fire up Matthew Stafford this week if you can, if he's on waivers. If you're struggling at quarterback, you're looking for a fill-in, Matt Stafford should be the play there. Now, that's going to do it for us today. If you want my complete weekly rankings for this week, you can find them on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find that in the description in the comment section down below. And you can also find in the description in the comment section down below is a link to use promo code Ron on Underdog Fantasy. You will match your first deposit up to $500. They have said that they have extended this past October 4th, but they don't know how long they're going to keep it open for. So that's a really good deal. You use promo code Ron on Underdog Fantasy. I have a link in the description in the comment section down below. You click it, it'll take you to Underdog Fantasy. It'll use promo code Ron. You can then match your first deposit up to $500, which is insane. And you can check out the pick'em slips here. Last week we went 3-2. I had somebody in my Discord use a bunch of the picks that I recommended, the hires on the pick'em slips, and then he also added some of his own. He cashed out really big, so make sure you check it out. You have up top Tua, where they do every single week. They give you like kind of a freebie here, 0.5 total yards. Of course, you'll go higher. We have the Calvin Ridley hire, the Dalton Kincaid hire, Raheem Mostert, and Tank Dell. If all 5 of those hit, you 20 extra money. Make sure you check it out. Have some fun. Maybe mix and match. Maybe use a couple of the ones that I like. Use a couple of the ones that you like. But make sure you check out the pick'ems. It's a great way to sort of sweat out some of these games this year. And as always, if you enjoy, make sure to go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm